No, it was like a faith. We used to have a saying called hip hop, you don't stop. And that's what it was. Hip hop, you don't stop. Hip hop, you don't quit.
He was once called a teacher of hip-hop, a rapper who spoke about knowledge instead of money, about consciousness instead of flaunting. But the deeper you look into KRS-One's journey, the more you realize behind that preach from the mic persona are moments that made all of hip-hop fall silent. Not out of reverence, out of shock. There were statements made when the entire United States was grieving. A single night when a stage descended into chaos. Choices to stand on sides where most people didn't dare to stand, and lyrics that listeners, even today, still avoid mentioning. So is KRS-One a misunderstood voice of awakening? Or proof that even the teacher harbors secrets that make people shudder when they dig deep? Before he became the teacher, before Lawrence Parker was etched into the Bronx Walk of Fame, there was a child who learned to survive by nobody except his own fear. He was born in 1965 in New York and grew up between Harlem and the Bronx, areas that in the 1970s were epicenters of poverty, crime, and violence. His childhood wasn't shaped by school or a warm family. It was shaped by constant instability. KRS-One later admitted he suffered severe abuse at the hands of his stepfather. Not isolated outbursts, a prolonged state of fear that burrowed deep into him. At around 16, he ran away. No drama, just a quiet decision to leave the place that caused the most pain and step into a world even more brutal. He became a homeless teenager in New York, slept in parks and subway stations. That vast city didn't offer protection. It taught him harsh lessons. The weak get devoured. The silent get trampled. It was at the very bottom that hip-hop appeared, not as an artistic dream, but as a survival tool. Rap gave him a weapon that fists couldn't. His earliest rhymes weren't meant to entertain. They were a way to survive. In 1987, Boogie Down Productions stood on the brink of explosion. Criminal Minded had just been released, shocking the entire American hip-hop scene. At KRS-One's side was Scott La Rock, DJ, producer, Big Brother figure. Then on August 27, 1987, Scott La Rock was shot and killed in the Bronx while trying to intervene in a confrontation. He was unarmed. He wasn't seeking violence. He simply stood in between believing that words could cool heated tempers. That bullet didn't only kill Scott La Rock. It killed the illusion that hip-hop could exist separate from street violence. For KRS-One, it wasn't just losing a friend. It was a fateful turning point. People often say Scott's death awakened him, but the truth is more complex. It planted in him a deep, unspoken guilt. Why did someone who didn't belong to the streets die by street law while he survived? From that moment, KRS-One no longer rapped the same way. The crime thug imagery began to feel uncomfortable. Not because he suddenly hated violence, but because he'd seen its real cost. BDP changed direction. Later songs began asking questions rather than making declarations. Instead of flaunting power, he spoke about consequences. It was here that the seed of the teacher was born, not from books, from a grave. The Bronx became his first podium. After 1987, he stepped out with a quietly formed belief. If hip-hop didn't correct itself, it would keep killing the very people who created it. The bridge wars with MC Sean weren't merely local beef. They were a battle over who had the right to define history. And when you win a war over history, it becomes easy to believe you have authority to decide who's right and wrong. By 1993, Return of the Boom Bap arrived as a statement, rejecting trends. Sound of the Police rang out like a siren aimed at police brutality and society's indifference. Not yet 30 years old, KRS-One was no longer just a successful rapper. He was a voice people listened to. It was at this peak that a new title emerged, the teacher. To him, it wasn't arrogance. It was responsibility. Hip-hop, in his view, was no longer mere music. It was a system of knowledge, a language of black history. But it was precisely here that a dangerous illusion began. When you survive the streets, lose your closest friend, win historic confrontations, and are hailed as the conscience of hip-hop, it becomes difficult to keep doubting yourself. The belief that I am right slowly grows larger than the question, could I be wrong? Certainty replaces hesitation. Responsibility transforms into the power to judge. KRS-One didn't realize that a podium isn't the same as a stage. On a stage, the audience can walk away. On a podium, words carry different weight. In 1992, the track 13 and Good was released. Nobody expected this song would become the first moment when a teacher left his students uneasy. The lyrics revolve around a first-person account of encountering a 13-year-old girl, told without warning labels, without clear framing. KRS-One doesn't describe anything graphically, but he also doesn't create enough distance for listeners to be certain this is a cautionary tale. That premise alone was enough to leave many stunned. From another rapper, it might have been dismissed as a misstep. From KRS-One, who was positioning himself as the teacher, it raised serious questions. Was he warning? Or crossing the very moral line he claimed to teach? What made the controversy linger wasn't the song itself. It was the absence of response. No apology. No clear public explanation. 13 and Good remained as it was, quietly sitting on the album. For the first time, the gap between intention and real-world impact became clearly visible. Then came Sound Factory. In late 1993, PM Dawn was performing at the club in New York. Prince B, their frontman, had made a remark in Details magazine. KRS-One wants to be a teacher, but what exactly is he teaching? To many, it was just a journalistic jab. To KRS-One, it was a direct insult. On December 26, 1993, KRS-One appeared at Sound Factory, not as a guest. While PM Dawn was performing, he walked straight onto the stage. No warning, only action. He snatched the microphone from Prince B. Within seconds, everything spiraled. Prince B was shoved hard and fell off the stage. The music stopped. Order collapsed. When a teacher uses fists to illustrate his lesson, the message itself becomes unclear. After that night, the title "The Teacher" no longer carried the same untainted meaning. But nothing compared to 2004. 3 years after September 11th, America was still in pain. Nearly 3,000 people had died. In that context, KRS-One appeared at a forum at Columbia University. He spoke about power, discrimination, how systems operate. Then he uttered the sentence that made everything stop. When the planes hit the buildings, we felt like justice has arrived. That sentence didn't explode inside the hall. It exploded once it left. KRS-One tried to explain. He spoke about years when many black people were denied entry into prestigious buildings because of how they dressed. He said for some marginalized communities, the World Trade Center wasn't only an economic symbol, but a symbol of a system that never stood with them. But society didn't listen that way. The media needed only one sentence. And stripped of context, it became brutally indefensible. From 2004 onward, an invisible label attached to KRS-One. Someone who crossed the line. In the early 2000s, hip-hop entered a new age. Nelly rose as its perfect symbol. Pop rap, catchy melodies, an image tailored for radio. When Country Grammar sold millions, KRS-One saw a sign of a lost soul. In 2002, he released Clear Him Out. The lyrics criticized commercial rap. Then he publicly called for a boycott of Nellyville. On MTV, he declared himself the supreme authority of hip-hop culture. That was the critical moment. Not because calling for boycott was wrong, but because it exposed a painful reality. KRS-One believed hip-hop still operated under an old order where a teacher could command and be obeyed. But hip-hop in 2002 was a global market, and markets don't listen to lectures. They listen to melodies. Nellyville sold millions. KRS-One's call created no significant wave. Hip-hop had chosen a different path. Then came 2016, the moment that changed everything permanently. Allegations of sexual abuse involving minors were brought forward against Africa Bambaataa. In the early days, many artists chose silence. KRS-One didn't hesitate. He dismissed the allegations as gossip. Then came the sentence that froze the air. I don't care. For decades, KRS-One had positioned himself as a moral compass. He lectured about consciousness, respect, responsibility. When faced with allegations involving minors, the most vulnerable group, the public expected at least one thing: caution or empathy. Instead, they received cold indifference. "I don't care" wasn't heard as a legal stance. It was heard as a dismissal. And when those words came from someone who claimed hip-hop was the language of awakening, the shock lay in a moral rupture. The reaction wasn't loud. People stopped defending him, stopped arguing on his behalf. In hip-hop, that's the most serious sign of all: abandonment. Today, KRS-One's name remains engraved on the Bronx Walk of Fame. He received BET's I Am Hip Hop Icon Award in 2007. He continues releasing albums, performing internationally, speaking about culture. But consensus no longer exists. For one segment, he's still the teacher, the man who saved hip-hop from meaninglessness. For another segment, he's no longer a guide. He's become a test of moral limits. His legacy isn't neat. It can't be framed by a single summary. KRS-One leaves behind two parallel images that coexist: a man who elevated hip-hop into a language of consciousness, and a man who pushed boundaries until hip-hop itself turned away. Both are true. Neither can erase the other.